support what happens in the online classroom, including counselors, librarians, support staff, and then also administrators that are involved in the evaluation of online programs. So pretty broad collection of things that I'm involved with doing. I'm right now on leave from Rio Hondo College, where I'm psychology faculty, and that's technically been my job for the past decade, but I haven't been there for the past decade. That's a good job! Yeah. I started there, and shortly after starting there, I got involved with curriculum, I got involved with distance education, and then I discovered the statewide academic senate and said, oh, that's what I want to do. And so I've basically been away for the past 8 years in capacities working with the statewide academic senate, and just finally extracted myself from all of their work at the end of last term. So this is like my first time of being free of wearing too many hats and to just focus on the online education initiative, which, how many of you think you know what the OEI is all about? Okay, good. All right, so you all want to learn about it. Hi. Yeah. I'm like, do I know what I'm doing already? Okay, all right, so we are here to talk about distance ed in a variety of capacities. And just a quick overview of what I'm going to cover. A little just sort of higher order picture of distance ed, what's happening, the sort of state of the state around distance education. Give you an overview of the OEI, and then talk about distance education and accreditation, and then finish up talking about the OEI course design rubric. There's a lot of bleeding between these topics. There's things that will come up time and time again. So if I ask you a question about something and you think I've talked about that something before, I might have, and it's a trick to make sure you're listening. Please feel free to interrupt me with questions. I can start talking really fast and then I may faint, and you won't understand anything that I'm saying, and that won't work well for any of us. So, in looking at what's big, what's hot right now in distance education, I cheated and I did an internet search on distance education hot topics, super original. I came across presentations done by the statewide academic senate in its last 2 spring plenaries that I thought provided a pretty good summary of what those hot topics are. In spring, they're hot topics in DE. We were focusing on the fact that quality trumps hype. And I love that title because that really is what I think the online education initiative is all about. The funding for the online education initiative came about as a consequence of a lot of hype around distance education and the idea that distance education was going to change the world in fundamental and phenomenal ways that were going to put you all out of your jobs. That excitement got converted into, let's see what we can do to ensure quality. And that's what the OEI is all about, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The more recent one was a bit more ominous in its focus. Hot topics in DE, avoiding the landmines. And it was focusing on all the things that we really have to think about so that we don't get in trouble regarding accreditation, and also other things that can create issues locally around distance ed, that can create chaos locally. Amongst these were sort of the 3 A's that I think of with respect to issues around distance ed. One of those being accessibility. That is always a hot topic. It's never going to stop being a hot topic. It's a hotter topic today than it used to be because there have actually been now some court cases where there was an issue around something not being accessible and someone went so far as to take it to court. And that's something that maybe we need to have happen so that we give accessibility the attention it deserves. You guys are so lucky to have somebody who can help you ensure your course materials are accessible. Another one, always a hot topic, everyone's favorite, accreditation. It's out there. One of the most important things regarding distance education and accreditation is the fact that your student who is taking courses online should have access to all the same services that your students do in the classroom-based class. And that often takes a lot of work. But it also has great benefits as it means your non-traditional students who can't obtain services on campus during normal working hours have a way to get those services. So it's really worth the effort. The other one is attendance. Does anyone know what LDA is? All right, some administrators walked in. Somebody should know what that means. Anybody? Nobody? Yeah.
Last day of attendance.
Last day of attendance. Thank you. I had a prize I would give it to you. So attendance comes into play when we're talking about financial aid. And that last date of attendance can become critical because it can determine whether or not financial aid dollars have to be paid back. And what happened a few years back was that the Department of Education changed its rules around last date of attendance in distance ed courses, and basically said that a student logging in was not sufficient to say that they had attended. They actually had to engage in some meaningful academic activity. And they came out with this new rule and started doing audits based on that. And one of the colleges that got caught in that was our own College of the Canyons. And in looking at this more, you'll find articles where the coordinator, I'm not sure exactly what his title is, was interviewed about this because basically they changed the rules and didn't bother to tell anybody. But they have changed the rules, and so that idea of regularly requiring your students to engage in your course in an academically meaningful way is absolutely critical because that's how you document last date of attendance. It's really, really important. Some of the other things from the Avoiding the Landmine were the importance of keeping your distance ed curriculum up to date. And this includes making sure you have your separate course approval process in place as required by Title V regulations. Another big one is substantive change reports for accreditation. For accreditation, at the point at which a student can complete a certificate or a degree at least 50% online, you then have to submit a substantive change report to ACCJC to recognize that you have that ability and to also provide further opportunity to make sure that you're providing all those services to those students. If your entire general education pattern could be completed online, then you probably have already hit that 50%. And then regular effective contact. Here in California, in the community colleges, we're so lucky. Sometimes we complain about our rules, but sometimes our rules actually are good for us. And we've always liked that regular and effective contact rule because it's so critical to student success and having a quality online course. Well, at some point in time, the federal government caught wind of what a great idea regular and effective contact is, and now in the federal guidelines around distance education, there's slightly different language, but basically accreditation now requires regular and effective contact. But of course, you all always been required to have regular and effective contact, so you have that in place. Making student learning support services available to online students, I mentioned that already, is a very critical one. Another one that often comes up and creates issues locally is issues around the right of assignment for DE classes. There used to be a time where there was upset because faculty who didn't want to teach online, had no interest in teaching online, would get assigned to teach online and get thrown into it. Sometimes that happens, but other times there may be issues where an administrator does not want to assign a distance ed course to a faculty member for one reason or another. And they do have that right, and those are contractual things that should be discussed locally to have a clear vision for how those things work. Another topic that the Statewide Academic Senate was pointing out, the importance of participation in selecting and using your local course management system, something that has come up a lot, particularly now that there's a course management system that you can have access to for free, at least for a limited time. But it's really critical that faculty play the principal role in making that decision and do so in an organized way. Another piece that comes up and is something to think about, particularly at times when there are no conflicts, is how the union can support distance ed. There's different ways that your union contract may or may not speak to distance ed. More and more colleges are putting a requirement that faculty need to be trained into their contract, so to ensure that, that faculty are trained before they're teaching distance ed courses. That just happened at Rio Hondo. We all, no matter how long we have been teaching online, we had to come back, go through training so that everyone started with that same level of understanding and no one got grandfathered out of it. We all had to do it. And then evaluating DE faculty is something that sort of comes up time and time again. So lots of colleges never actually created a process that works for DE, and they just take their old classroom-based process and use it on the online course, which often doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't really get at what is a good distance ed course. So back to that idea of online course quality. Do you have any mechanisms in place that provide you with an opportunity to check out the quality of your online offerings. At a minimum, what check must you have? No? Remember I told you I might have given the answers already before I asked the questions? Yeah. Okay, so you need to ensure that your courses are accessible. You need to be ensuring that you have regular and effective contact. Do you have any mechanisms in place for ensuring that? You're on the right track.
I'm not going to say. Well, in my online course, we have weekly assignments, and the students need to participate in them, and they're graded.
Okay, so that's how you do it. And we now know what she does and how she does it, but do you have any mechanisms, any systems in place for making sure that you're doing something to achieve that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I don't know that she's doing those things in her class, even though she said that they're important and she knows that. How would I? How would you all? Yes?
So for some reason Stacy's not answering you, but we have an instructional technologist and we have people in the student accessibility services who do check.
Okay, so you have people that do checks. Do they just go in and do checks for you all the time?
I'll answer the question. A few years back, we put in place a system to go through a handful of courses, which and I don't know who your predecessor was. Who was the predecessor? Bob, yeah. Just forgot his name. And he would look through the courses, and if there was something wrong, something that wasn't a PDF, it should be, or a video that wasn't closed captioned, he would let that faculty member know. But what we didn't have was follow-up to make sure that faculty member actually did what they're supposed to do. So we're now Elle's going through them again, and we're putting, it's all about policies. We have to have a policy in place to say, if you're not doing this, then you don't get to teach the class.
You've got help. You've got help.
It's in progress.
Yes.
So, all right, if you want to teach a new online course tomorrow, what do you have to do?
Get a course management system.
You have
We have one. Check, got it.
Curriculum review?
Go through curriculum. What has to happen in curriculum?
It has to be approved for a DE course.
Oh,
It has to be at least 50%.
Okay, in order to be categorized as a distance ed course for purposes of portion, it has to be at least 50% online. Okay, so something happens in curriculum, right? Do you have a name for a form? Is it a special form that you use?
DE form.
To the DE form? Okay. So, we are all required by our Title V regulations to have a separate approval process for distance ed. And every college does this slightly different, and what's involved in it may differ. But what we already heard, maybe part of this process should include regular effective contact, whether or not your course is accessible. It's an opportunity to check on those things. And lots of colleges use this as that sort of first order mechanism for double checking quality. Yeah.
So are these other colleges that have this process in place, are they actually looking at the content? Because all we have to do is check a box.
So
There's
most of the time there's some companion piece where the course is actually looked at
So it has to
by
be created
people.
first.
So some colleges will have a committee that actually looks at it. Some colleges, particularly for the accessibility piece, will say you have to have your local person whose job it is look at your course to make sure that it is in fact accessible. So that there's actually not just, yeah, sure, it's good, but there's actually a mechanism for double checking that it is. Yeah.
I was wondering, what's going on with the @ONE training? Because before I taught online, we were required to take the @ONE training for a whole summer, and now I'm not sure is it still?
Yeah, the @ONE training absolutely still exists. There have been some modifications to some of their courses. They used to have a series of courses that made up their certification that has now been condensed into one very long mega course that they may be looking at how to make it like an incredibly intense 12 weeks, 12, 14 weeks. So they're looking at how they might space that out a little bit to make it a little bit more manageable for working folks like yourselves. So their courses absolutely still exist and have been revamped in part to align them with the OEI course design rubric. And the long-term vision is that there will be modules from the @ONE courses that are aligned to the OEI course design rubric. So if you have a problem with a particular part of the rubric, you could actually go to a module to learn about what you need to do in order to align your course with the rubric. That's such a good question. Thank you.
Well, I'm just wondering, are we required to do the At One training? Because when I.
At College of Marin, there's no formal requirement for any of us to take training before. We're trying to change that. It's a big process, and that's one of our goals. But ideally, no one should be teaching without some training.
At your college, when everyone had to actually do camp for recertification, did they use a homemade process or did they use the At One?
They chose to use an At One. They chose to use a homemade one. I said that completely wrong.
So they
Yeah.
made their own and
Yes.
everybody attended it
Yes.
simultaneously?
It was online.
It's
It
online.
was all entirely online. Our accessibility specialist created the accessibility component. Experienced online faculty created other components, and everybody had to go through all of it.
And are you sharing that with other colleges? Do you know?
I don't know that we have, but everything that At One does is absolutely accessible, I don't know that I would share. I would share ours. It's very homegrown. It feels homegrown, but it did the trick. It exposed faculty to things that maybe they had never been exposed to if they hadn't been through any sort of formal training, and so it was important. It was important from that perspective. And I think it's always really, really healthy for online faculty to be put in the seat of an online student. There may be things that you do that are driving your students crazy that you don't realize as you're designing. But if you step back and were in a student position, you'd be like, that is just so lame. Why do they do that to me?
Yeah, one of the most valuable things I think, the experiences that I've had is I took 2 graduate courses, online courses at San Francisco State last semester and the semester before. That was so enlightening. To be a student in an online course at a university, really helpful for teaching.
And I'm sure it improved your teaching as you saw things that they did that you liked and then maybe things that you didn't like.
Yeah, I copied a lot of stuff.
Okay, so the separate approval, that's an opportunity to check for accessibility, to check for regular effective contact. Is there anything else that should happen during that process? What do you look, so anyone on curriculum here? So what are you looking for when you look at these DE, whatever they're called?
We look for things like what kind of resources is going to be involved.
Okay.
If there's any interaction with other departments. Hours involved. I'm not sure what we're looking for.
I know, I'm trying.
Our DE form is pretty basic. It really is just looking to see that there's been, it's ADA compliant, there's the checkbox for regular effective contact. Who else is, do you
It's
remember?
not attached to any course, there's no course that's been created, and so that's part of the problem.
So a person can say, oh, I want to teach D, so they send in the curriculum, but maybe they haven't even created the course yet.
So the separate approval should
It's backwards.
the separate approval should be attached to an
It's not
existing course.
Tied to an
Yeah.
instructor.
And you could put a course forward through curriculum, and then maybe you're not even assigned that course. So there's no ownership necessarily.
Yeah.
Can I just add a little, I'm the accessibility person on campus. Al's the genius with the AT stuff, I'm the general person. So if I could just frame a couple of things with accessibility from a federal standpoint. So the feds are coming out after a new standard, as you well know. It's coming 2016, which essentially means they haven't really enforced this stuff up until now. So because of all the legal complaints and a variety of different outcomes, they are now starting to enforce it pretty regularly and consistency. And Ella's done a lot of legal research. We both have, but she's really jumped into it. So this year going forward, it's just going to be a whole new world. So looking at accessibility, not only the information that you post online, the structure of your curriculum, but there are peripheral things. So for instance, your syllabus, is your syllabus available well in advance of the course? Because if a student is blind, for instance, they're going to need to have materials, hard materials converted, right? The way that you advertise your course is that sometimes that's put on a different mechanism, for instance, the university or college website, and that itself may not be accessible if you make an minor change to the text, it can change the accessibility to it. When you design your core learning outcomes for a class, should you get a specific complaint going to the Office of Civil Rights, that's the enforcement body for accessibility, they would look to what your core learning outcomes actually ask for, and that determines whether an accommodation should have been granted or not been granted, frames it. So that's peripheral to the technology piece, but it integrates into both. And the reason I mention it is, should OCR call, and I've had the pleasure of going through multiple complaints over the years, they ask for what your technology looks like and what your policy structure looks like, in addition to addressing the individual complaint. So there's a 3-tier review. They want to see the change from a federal perspective is accessibility in general as a pattern of practice on your campus, and then they look into the specific complaint. And the last part, and I'll get out of here.
No, I appreciate it. I think
The
it's
last
really
part that I'll suggest is your testing structure. What does that look like? Be very precise. Let's say a student gets all the time that they need, because if a student wants double time, for instance, then you're on the hook, right? Or if you say, I've provided accommodations within, I've taken a 1-hour test and I give everybody 3 hours, so the accommodations are built in. OCR would say, oh no, that would be 6 hours. So be very specific as to the time that students get for the test. The same for turning in assignments. If you say a student trying to be compassionate gets all the time in the world to turn in an assignment, you might be grading that assignment sometime in 2018. Right? So and I've gone through multiple complaints on that as well. You have to be very precise as to when it's due, and then our office can come in and offer more time for that specific assignment, right? But it has to go through sort of a protocol. And then being very specific of the materials that would be ideally required for your specific class well in advance of the class actually taking place, because of the idea that the textbooks will have to be researched to see if they are, if there's a published version online or a published version that's accessible. Many schools buy textbooks that are not accessible because the companies are not required to do so. There's a separate federal structure, it's called the BPAC structure, that says, look, you need to self-evaluate as a text company or as a company that's making course materials. You need to self-evaluate how accessible it is. So a lot of us go out and buy this stuff and go, well, it says it's accessible, and oftentimes it isn't accessible. So, which is why L is in place to sort of make sure that that actually happens, because sometimes people are overly ambitious. But if you make those materials, a notice of your materials well in advance, say at least a month or so, we're totally covered. The reason why that's a challenge is, say a student who has blindness is enrolled in your class, they try to get your syllabus well in advance, they can't get it, they start the first day, and it takes us 6 weeks to get the stuff made in accessible format. They flunk the class, file an OCR complaint, we lose. That's basically it. Anyway, that's my spiel.
I just wanted to mention our course welcome letters for all of you teach online. That's the function where you put in your books already, and Stacy, bless her, does check every single one of them. So just so you know, every instructor who teaches online is going through that process many months ahead of time. You can see why it's important that Stacy gets the updates, because some of us change our textbooks. I have to, the edition changed, I had to go redo all my course welcome letters. Stacy had to re-implement all of that. Just keep that in mind when your edition changed, because we're not checking for that. If you change your edition, we get audited, then you're out of compliance.
And I am human. I've missed, somebody, I missed a date. Someone's date was from last fall. You know what I mean? Those kinds of, even just those little details. Make sure, is it a Thursday that they're logging in? What's the date? Give me the date. I know it seems like, oh, well, I'm just going to say at the beginning of the semester, or I'm just going to say Friday before the semester starts, or after the semester starts. But as Sven was saying, be clear. We need to have dates in there, and it's just a little bit of tweaking from one semester to the next.
Ultimately, it is our responsibility to make sure those course welcome letters are correct. It really is not her job to be editing and correcting. So, and I made a mistake with the edition too. So I just caught it. So, we really have to be a little bit more diligent.
Yeah, I remember when it first became a requirement that we weren't allowed to buy any videos that weren't captioned. And you buy them and they would claim they're captioned and then they show up and they're not captioned. So it sounds like those same sort of things are still going
Or
on.
they use an automatic programming as junk, right? So in one of my previous institutions, the president's speech was on automatic captioning, and he mentioned terrorist about 15 times in there. It was made it very amusing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So, on the separate approval thing, part of it is, kind of quandary is, we have our basic course outline, and we have a DE addendum, and if it's a DE course, it goes through a separate course approval. But the DE addendum is asking things that is really gonna be the actual teacher who teaches it, but when a discipline puts it forward, they don't know who's teaching it. So I'm wondering, is there a separate approval of the actual course?
That's a really great point. And that happens at most colleges. I decide I want to take a particular course online. I do the separate approval process or whatever it's called at that college. I walked through and said, here's how I'm going to teach the course and here's what I'm going to do. And I take my course to the accessibility specialist, and there may not be any mechanism in place for when somebody else comes along and teaches that course. I don't know that colleges, I'm not sure many colleges have addressed that, but it's definitely something that would make a lot of sense to look at. Unless that new faculty is necessarily going to be teaching to the same structures that I said I'm going to do, doing the same things that I'm doing, it would seem that they should have some sort of secondary check, and most certainly for their course itself to ensure that it's accessible. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and then the other question was, I think we've been going on the assumption that if you have a face-to-face and an online version, that the content and most everything should be exactly the same.
Absolutely. I mean, you're teaching ultimately to the same course outline of record, and that you just hit on one of the things that should be coming up in that separate approval process. Because ultimately the course you're teaching to an existing course outline of record, there's likely articulation that goes along with that course outline of record. Therefore, part of that separate approval process, no matter what, should be ensuring that that course that you're teaching is going to accomplish all the things and cover all the same things that the face-to-face course does. At the end of the day, when that course is on your transcript, it's not going to say so-and-so took the online version of the course that's lacking X, Y, and Z, or added P, D, and Q. It's going to show that same course, that the course that you have, the course outline of record course. That's really important. As we said, compliance, accessibility, regular effective contact, accreditation standards, all that good stuff. And a lot of that does get to quality. And it sounds like this welcome letter you all push out is a really great tool for ensuring that students are informed about things before classes start. All right, so now I'm going to get into what the OEI is and what the OEI is all about. I suggested that the OEI came along because there was hype about something related to distance education. Anyone have a guess as to what I'm referring to? Do you remember a while back when there was this idea that distance ed was going to... MOOCs, yes, thank you. Back at a time when we were turning students away because the economy had taken a dive, they'd cut our funding, people were losing their jobs, coming back to us. UC and CSU weren't taking students, so our students were staying with us longer. We had a huge access problem. At the same time, we had MOOCs out there, massive open online courses, that were claiming that they were going to democratize education, make it so every citizen anywhere who could get to a computer could become educated, and basically we were going to get rid of traditional universities and MOOCs were going to take over the world. Our governor was really excited about MOOCs. He just thought they were the neatest things. I think he had a crush on one of the MOOC developers, and it was pretty intense. So, consequently, there was this idea, let's put money into distance ed. And basically, all three segments of public higher education in California got a big chunk of change to do something with distance ed. And that is what the Online Education Initiative is today. And there are pieces in it that get at some of the ideas that come from that vision. And we try to downplay that part of it because that's not the part we like. But we're at an incredibly different time today. So this came about when we were turning students away. We didn't have enough seats. Today, it's not the same. I don't know about you all, but I've been in meetings where this whole discussion about that evil college over the hill that's stealing all of our high school students, so we don't have more students coming in. How do we get them back? Where are the students? It's a completely different time. We don't have an access issue anymore, but we probably will someday in the future. So if we have money and we want to use distance ed and we want to address access issues, what could we do today? Well, our thought is, what if we work on making sure distance education, all of our online offerings, are the best that they possibly can be, so that every student that enrolls in an online course has the greatest chances of success the first time they take the course. If every student passed every course they took the first time they took it, we'd be in a lot better shape. So everything that we're doing is about how do we make that happen. So what we want to do is ensure that more students are able to complete their educational goals by increasing both access to and success in high-quality online courses and programs. And so that involves a lot of different pieces. What we're doing on sort of the big scale is we're looking at providing technology resources that maximize economies of scale. So buying things as a system to make something that you couldn't afford normally more affordable. We're looking at providing system-wide resources for online students and system-wide resources for developing high-quality online courses. And again, there's lots of different pieces in this, but ultimately, we want to work with all 113 of our colleges to help them in whatever way we can. So, we're looking at improving success and retention by having prepared students, prepared faculty, and quality course design and content resources, and I'll talk a bit about the things that are already in place. Also providing resources to colleges to allow them to grow their online programs if they needed to develop more online courses. The last bit is the bit that we try to downplay because it's the complicated part. Providing students with opportunities to take classes when and where they need them. This is something we commonly refer to as the exchange. And the idea is to make it easy for students to get a course that they can't get at their local college at another college. And there's nothing easy about that. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But that's the piece we like to downplay. So, when the OEI came out and was looking for colleges to be involved, it really was planning on having just 10 or 12 colleges to pilot the things that we were working on. There were about 58 colleges that were interested in being part of the OEI. Consequently, we stepped back and said, how can we rework our pilot strategy to serve more colleges and to be involved with more colleges through this process? So we decided we would have 3 groups. One group would be our full launch group that would be the first to participate in this exchange. Another group, the readiness group, would be piloting an assessment for online readiness that students would take, and then online modules to help students where they were deficient. So if they did the assessment and discovered they have problems with time management, then there would be a module that they can go to help brush up their time management skills. A third group was our tutoring group, and they have been piloting an online tutoring platform. So we initially had 3 groups, and now all 3 groups are pretty much doing the same thing except for the exchange. So all 3 groups now are teaching in the course management system that was selected by the OEI. These are select courses at the select colleges. They're using an online tutoring platform. They're also using the readiness assessment and the readiness modules, and a couple of other things are just starting to come into the mix. So we have at each of these colleges just a few courses that have gone through a review process, because ultimately, if we're going to have a select group of courses that we're going to simplify access to, we want to make sure that those courses are the best courses that they can be. And that's where the OEI Quality Course Design rubric comes into play. If you know your basic information about colleges. This represents colleges of all different shapes and sizes, and courses in all colleges that were using all different course management systems. We really sought to get a nice distribution, and they were all colleges that either required faculty training or were in the process of requiring faculty training for teaching online. That was one of the criteria that we used. So, what's been happening? So we signed a contract with Link Systems to provide online tutoring. So all the courses that are part of the pilot are using that online tutoring platform. And actually, as of this term, all the online courses at those 24 colleges are getting to use this tutoring platform, in part because we want to learn more about the effective use of online tutoring. What do you think is the hardest part about online tutoring and offering online tutoring to students? Or offering tutoring to students in general?
Availability.
Sort of. Yeah.
Matching students up to somebody who can teach them what they need.
Okay, so let's say we have the people that the students need. What are we missing? What might not be happening?
The material.
Schedule coordination.
Access.
Students reaching out.
The students. Who's more likely to go for tutoring? The student in calculus who's afraid of getting a B instead of an A, or the student in intermediate algebra who's probably going to fail? Big problem. We need to figure out a way to make online tutoring attractive and get the students who need it most to be willing to go get it. It's not easy. I had not thought about that, and I got in a conversation about this, and it was like, wow, I get it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we're hoping to gather data this term from all these online courses that are trying to get their students to go to online tutoring to figure out what to do. And there definitely are strategies that can be incorporated, but you want to be careful. You don't want to mandate that all your students go to online tutoring and then they all go the last week of class just to go because you told them they had to go, and then the students who really need the tutors can't get there. So that you don't want to let that happen. So we are using this vendor, and they're actually housed in Florida, and a lot of the tutors are people who are retired, academics who are retired. This is what they're going to see. They're in Florida, right? Makes sense. And they're very faculty friendly. Like, you can sit there and say, here are resources you should show my students, here are resources you shouldn't show my students, here is help you can provide them, here is help you cannot provide them. So they really cater to the faculty members' interests in providing the tutoring. So we're providing that for free to those pilot colleges, but we've also signed contracts so that colleges who want to have those tutoring resources can get it at a much reduced price compared to other ones. Everything in underlying is things that are available to everybody. We have a no-cost platform that can be used to connect your local tutors to your online students. And so that exists, that's available to colleges now. If anyone is interested in finding out more about that, I can point you to those resources. We've also developed basic skills support resources that you can then embed in your course. So if there's certain problems that your students commonly have, you can have a sort of go-to link to help them there. We're working on piloting these things, and we need to sort of provide some instructions about how best to deploy them, and so that's where we're at with that piece of it. We just signed a contract for a proctoring solution. Worst name ever. Proctorio. And this is a really, really neat system that uses machine learning to detect suspicious behavior. That sounds very new agey, but basically the idea is that you have a camera on the student, you're catching keystrokes, and so you know if the student got up and left while they were in the middle of the exam, you know what the student looks like, you have all that information. So not only can it be used for traditional proctoring, it also can be a second measure for student authentication, making sure that the student is the student that they're supposed to be. So you can track whether or not it's a blonde woman that sits down at that computer every time she's doing something in the course and so forth. We are also working on a system-wide network of proctoring sites. So human-based places that students can go. This has been something that has been in the works since the beginning of time, and we're hoping to push it over the edge and actually make it happen. I went to Proctoria's website because I wanted to see what they said about themselves, since they should definitely be embarrassed about their name. But they, lots of words here, but they really, their sort of story is that from whatever vantage point they were looking at things, they were noticing that there was a disconnect between the scores that students were getting on exams that weren't proctored and exams when they were proctored. And so that's sort of the idea behind it, and it's ultimately about really ensuring the integrity of online instruction overall.
I have kind of a question. I'd like your thoughts on this, or maybe after. I taught my first online course. I had a SC student who turned in a suspiciously A+ paper, a research paper. Turnitin.com didn't find any plagiarized material. But when I looked at the metadata in his Word document, the author was a different name than him. So I confronted him by email about it. And he said, she's actually my girlfriend, and I did the whole course on her computer. Which totally threw into question, okay, who actually took the course?
Yeah.
There's no way that I can prove that he wasn't telling the truth. So I'm sure none of these are actually going to be addressing that kind
Yeah, I mean, and that's where if you did have, I mean, is this a paper-based course or are there exams?
There are weekly exams, and then there's a major research paper.
So this will also pick up inconsistencies in the student's work. So if you had one person doing the work on one day, that it should be able to pick that up, as I understand it. I'm not like a machine learning expert. I just started imagining Terminator and the machines taking over the world.
It actually got a little bit more complicated. So when we checked IP addresses, the IP address of the computer he was using is in Illinois, and he gave the school a permanent address of Truckee, California, with a mailing address of somewhere in Illinois. So there's all kinds of
Wow. You're always going to have those. We can't lose sleep over.
I was lucky to find it first time. I taught.
Yeah. Trial by fire. Yeah. Yeah.
On that, I recently have been taking some online classes, and one of the things about education, I have to show a picture of my license with my picture on it, and myself, in addition to the keystroke thing.
So it sounds like they're using
Yeah.
something like Factorio.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus,
Can we do that? Is that going to be privacy issues?
I don't know, I mean, if you have an issue with it, then you wouldn't want to do it.
Sure.
I covered some information on there, just enough, but not all the information, just so you can see what is needed.
Yeah. Here and then here.
So I'm not sure if it's exactly the same company, but I have colleagues at some other community colleges who do online courses and have used some service similar to this. But they mentioned to me that their college is required to pay for the service for any student that wants it in the course. And that became a major issue at some of the colleges about whether the college was willing to budget for that cost.
Yeah. I know there are proctoring solutions that are more really literally where there's somebody sitting there watching you on the other end of the computer, and therefore there is a person cost and there is a per event cost, and you're actually scheduling the exam. Where this is, Proctorio actually lives within the course management system. It's there, yeah. So it's kind of fundamentally different. I don't know that that's actually a really good question, whether or not any of our colleges are using Proctorio right now. I'm going to look into that.
I thought
This might have
heard
been a
they were
human-based
vetting.
system.
I think it was the last coordinators meeting with LeBaron. They were vetting a couple, I think, of different ones that they were hoping to make a contract with, so that there would be that sort of reduced cost across
Was one
the
of them
system.
Proctor U?
I think
One of them was Proctor U.
Yeah.
This was another one. I thought there were three that they were sort of in the process of. looking at.
Yeah. So we signed a contract with Proctorio.
Okay.
There's a lot of companies with bad names out there. I did a meeting yesterday. Yeah, the worst things. Yeah.
No, so I was just wondering, is there the same kind of concern for the face-to-face classroom in terms of, I know the proctoring thing is groups, that's what about in the regular class? And I never hear any concern about, show your ID at the door, yet and I'm glad to see this is in place, but I'm just wondering why is there no concern on the face-to-face level, and somehow it's all directed toward DE, as if there's students out there who are only going to cheat online?
I think that's a really good point. I know lots of teachers do different things. I think with the classroom-based class, I know that yesterday, George was 5'5" and, had red hair, and George continues to be 5'5" and have red hair, and it's George on the paper when he turns it in. So there you have that mechanism in place. If you're teaching your online courses properly, you're interacting with your students frequently enough that you can say, yeah, that's how Karen writes. That's how she wrote yesterday. That's how she wrote tomorrow. That's how she wrote last week. So you have some of that, but you don't have that same that same level of certainty. I know when I was in school, I certainly had classes where you were not allowed to wear hats, and you had to have your driver's license on the desk while you're taking the exam. So I think it's because you don't have that same level of control. I imagine that if we started to see more problems in the classroom, that there would be more of that. And we certainly know those things do happen in classrooms.
I'm just wondering if there's any actual data that suggests that there's more of this in online education than in a face-to-face classroom.
Well, I think the difference is if I'm taking an exam in the classroom and I turn over, pick up my notes and start looking through them, you, the teacher, are going to see that and going to stop me, whereas in the online classroom, you don't have that same level of protection. So there's that sort of that fundamental environmental difference. I think we know this as a culture. We have a problem with cheating more in general, and this is we can be more vigilant in the classroom. This is the way to be more vigilant in the online environment.
So there is, it is, and if you have your phone, just Google boostmygrade.com, WizKidTakeOnLifeFastly.com. There's like 50 different sites. Ed has written about it, and Proctor and companies like that aren't a solution to that. WizKid Take my online course for me.com pays the WizKid $10 an hour, if you want to know. I've registered for some of these sites because I want to see how much you get paid to do it and how much you have to pay to get it. And the going rate for someone to take your course from beginning to end, so Proctor would never catch it.
Unless driver's license.
Yeah, but I mean, all of that is provided, right? You hold up a driver's license, a fake ID with a name and a picture, and that student does take your course for you. A lot of this is done off American shore, but plenty of it's done in America. The average course is $2,200. So community colleges, many of us think our students couldn't afford that, but oftentimes community college, someone's coming in to get that one English 151 that I teach because it's the course they need for their UC, it's a transfer course, and they're already at a UC. So just to put that out there, that can't happen in the classroom. It's much more difficult for a whiz kid to show up and take a seat for an entire semester. But online, that's actually the new face of cheating. It's not somebody writing a paper using a different computer. It's somebody taking a full course for you.
Well, that's one of the
It's not
things
just the cheating.
his girlfriend actually taken.
Well, or not even her. I mean, it's somebody
Sure.
taking the whole course. And I think in the past we were more worried about individual papers, and that's still a concern. But it's more, how do you know your students are your students?
It's also federal funds. It's not just the fact that somebody else, there's that whole aspect. Okay, cheating's been going on forever, right? You can buy a paper when we're still turning in papers. There's that whole aspect, but there's also at a federal level a real problem in terms of using federal dollars and embezzling federal dollars because you're using financial aid money to pay someone, right, to take this course, or you're paying a portion of financial aid money to somebody else who's getting a kickback from that financial aid, taking this course. So, and that's where we're losing billions of dollars across the education system, regardless of whether it's community college, state, or UC.
It seems like a really simple thing, but some colleges have an honor code that students actually sign their name to at the very beginning of the semester. And they did a study that there was a greater percentage of less cheating when the students, I think Colorado University has it. It's an honor code, you can look it up. And it would be a good idea, I think, for us to have something like that rather than just somewhere in our on our website there's an honor code, but I don't know how many students. I tried to find it the other day and I couldn't even find it in the maze of the Marin.edu, but it was a very simple honor code and supported by the entire college and all the community colleges. So it kind of feels like it's not just your instructor that's enforcing this, it's the entire college. So I think it gives the student an awareness right from the beginning that there will be consequences. I don't know if we want to.
No, I think that's a great point. I have seen colleges where before you even log into the course, it's right there. The code's right there. You're by virtue of logging into your course, you're agreeing to that code, and so that's one approach to it. Which kind of leads us into a different topic that's related. That is plagiarism. What's the first thing that you should be doing to prevent plagiarism? Most obvious thing, English teacher. What do you have to do to prevent plagiarism?
Policy and explain it.
And you have to explain what plagiarism is, because oftentimes, I remember when I was in elementary school, you took out the encyclopedia, you copied what you needed, you handed it in, you got an A. Really easy. They need to know what it is. And plagiarism detection tools are a way for faculty to do little gotchas, or it can be a way to teach your students what is and isn't plagiarism. So we are working on obtaining a plagiarism tool that would be used by our pilot colleges. We had been hoping to negotiate and get a good rate with the plagiarism tool that is most commonly used, but they're not very nice people, and so we haven't gotten anywhere with them. That would be Turnitin. And so we're looking at others and may look at bringing on another one that's considerably less expensive. And then again, we would sign a contract and ideally make it available to others. But we really want to make sure that we provide professional development around it so that it isn't a gotcha tool, it's a teaching tool so students know and understand plagiarism and what it is. Yeah?
I find that a lot of my students there's a mentality, I used to hop on my bike and go to the library, get a book out, footnote everything, and turn in the report with the footnotes from where I got my information, but information is so accessible, that it's at our students' fingertips, and some of them don't understand that Wikipedia isn't reliable,
Right.
and that they have to cite their resources, and that it's just a mentality that they have because everything is just so.
The days of having your index cards of your notes and organizing them, and then every now and then there's that bit that you couldn't paraphrase that you put in quotes so that you know what to do with it.
Right.
Long gone. We're ancient now.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the hardcore academic things that we were doing. On the student services side of things, we developed modules that address common issues that students have. So I mentioned the readiness assessment. That's something that we're paying company to provide. But it links to modules that are readily available to you. They were pushed out with lots of fanfare towards the end of last academic year. They're really quite good. I encourage you to go look at them. If I don't have a link here, they've been sent them. You've been sent them. You have them. You know them.
They're on our website too.
They're really quite good. My personal dream is that someday we'll have the assessment that everybody can use and have for free. That's my dream. Don't go telling anyone I said it was going to happen. I already got in trouble for that, and I said no. Whenever I talk about it, I say that is my dream because it would make a lot of sense for us all to have that as a first measure. I mean, the worst thing is that online student who gets into an online class, doesn't know how to use a mouse, doesn't have a computer, and they think online is easy. Those are the students that we want to provide information to before they get into our online courses. We just signed a contract with something called Cranium Cafe. Not a great name because I don't think it tells you what it's all about. But Cranium Cafe is a solution for connecting students with counselors. And so here I cheated, I went to their website. It basically provides a mechanism for connecting students and counselors. So this is being deployed to the pilot colleges with training around it for counselors. We do have some colleges that are outside of the pilot who are already just about to sign a contract, so we'll bring them in, provide training to their counselors to help them use it. And this goes again back to that idea of providing the resources to online students that you would get if you were on campus.
What is this, academic counseling? Counseling for
Advising counseling. Yeah. So we already have a tutoring over there. This is planning your schedule, those sorts of things. Okay, my area now. So on the professional development side, as I said, if we're going to have this exchange, if we're going to simplify access to a group of courses, we want to make sure those courses are pretty awesome. So we have established a standard for what those courses have to look like. We have the OEI course design rubric. All courses that would ultimately be offered in the exchange have to have at least a 3 in every section of the rubric and an overall score of at least 70% in order to be part of the exchange. So we developed the course design standards, piloted them once, and then revised them, because initially you messed up over here, you made a mistake in your course design over here, and then you got dinged for it here, and here, and here, and here. So went back, revised the rubric to streamline it a little bit. It still results in like a 22-page report when it's all done. But we have these the course design standards. We've reviewed over 100 courses and trained reviewers to review the courses. And this is, it's an interesting process. The reviews are very careful about saying, you're doing this so well, and this is really good. But over here, it might be better if you did this. So they tried very hard to be kind and sweet. And even if you scored really well, it's still going to be 20 or so pages. They're crazy long. So we are training reviewers, and we now have broken our training up into 2 pieces. The first is applying the OEI course design rubric that we've been offering across the state. And anyone can come and take that. And the second part of the training is 2 weeks online. And we're hoping that colleges will like this approach to taking a look at courses and perfecting them or improving them and use it. One thing to point out, just because a course is not aligned to our rubric doesn't mean it's not an awesome course. It just means it doesn't align to the rubric. And we're very careful about the fact that the only person who sees the outcome of that review process is that faculty member. It's not a tool for evaluation. It's a tool for assessment of the quality of online course design for the faculty member to use down the road. We held a professional development summit. One of the things we're also doing is providing our faculty, pilot faculty, with access to instructional designers, which you guys already have, and also access to accessibility specialists, which you guys have. So you're very lucky to have those resources that lots of colleges don't have. As we are now very much in the midst of helping colleges move to Canvas, we also offer weekly support calls for Canvas faculty. So that jumped ahead where you probably have heard this already, it's not news. We selected a course management system, which is the course management system that all those exchange courses will be on, and that is Canvas. And so we're supporting Canvas, and that's become a big part of what we're doing these days. @ONE developed a 4-week Introduction to Teaching in Canvas course that is now free to all faculty at colleges that are moving to Canvas. And then we're also doing train-the-trainer sessions to train people to use the course to teach Canvas to their faculty. There's also a self-paced version of the course. So if you wanted to get a sense of what it feels like to walk through an automated Canvas course, you can actually go into the self-paced Canvas course, get a feel for what Canvas is like, and learn a little bit more about it. One of the things about anything that @ONE develops, that they are Creative Commons licensed. So that course, if a college didn't like how the course was set up, they could change it, do whatever they want with it, and teach it to their faculty in whatever form they desire. So we decided that we needed to have a common course management system, recognizing that it's not good for students to have to relearn the classroom when they go from one course to another. So the common course management system that was selected is Canvas, and a big part about having this common system was to allow us to establish a statewide online community and to allow for statewide support. I was talking to someone from the State University of New York, where they've always had a centrally provided course management system. And I was like, well, why don't any of your colleges go off and do something else? And he looked at me and said, well, why would they? Everyone has it, everyone's being supported, they're very happy with it. So we're kind of going about it the other way around. No one has to go, but if you go, there's support available. We're really trying to make it as easy for colleges as possible. As we develop resources and bring on resources, these are then deployed in Canvas, readily accessible in Canvas. And we're really trying to provide a really high quality course management system to the colleges if they want to use it.
And yet, every semester I have a student who says, I took another online course and it wasn't set up like this and I'm having trouble. So do you see in the future, or does anybody see in the future that we're gonna have like a sort of a, you know, a set shell that we all use, and, or is it always?
So one of the characteristics of Canvas that makes it easier to use for students is that there is probably more consistency across courses than there is in something like Moodle or Blackboard. If anyone's familiar with Etudes, anyone know Etudes? So what I personally like about Etudes is there's a consistency. You log in and you know where to go. Canvas has that same kind of consistency. One of the things, if you're looking at lots of different online courses and lots of different platforms, you'd be surprised how confusing it is to figure out where to go. We often do our students a huge disservice. And someone was saying a really great thing to do, test, is to have one of your friends go into your online course and see if they can figure out what to do. Without you telling them anything, because you know where to go, you designed it. I mean, I think that'd be a great, great flex activity. Come in, put on your big girl pants, be ready for it all, and let someone walk through your course and see what they find as confusing. And that's where, online course design becomes really important.
I mean, they actually get a lower grade because they'll come in thinking that this forum that they're supposed to do in my course is going to be the same as somebody else's forum, and it's graded completely differently and it's set up differently, and then a few weeks in, they'll say, oh, I didn't realize that was the rubrics for grading.
Well, and that's why it's very important that everyone's explaining exactly how these things work, so that when they're in my course and I do these things this way, and they go into your course and you do things that way, the students have been fully informed, and that, and that's if you've looked at the rubric, that's in there. Your students need to know what's expected of them, and they need to know what they can expect of you. Yeah, I mean, people often say, why do we put so much more scrutiny on online courses? You walk into a classroom, there's going to be this general setup that you can figure out. If you guys walked in this classroom and the desks were all facing different directions, and I was nowhere to be found, that you wouldn't know where to sit, you wouldn't know what to do. And oftentimes in our online courses, we do that to our online students. They get in there and they don't know what to do. And maybe they click around a little bit and figure out, or maybe they just give up. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't talk about, no one's, having big discussions about your classroom-based design. And I started to write something a while back where it said, we're held to such a higher standard. If you're teaching in a classroom, I'm teaching in a classroom, I am not responsible for ensuring that there's a board here, that there's lights, that there's heat. I don't have to worry about that. But in an online classroom, I do have to take care of all those things. And so there necessarily is a greater level of responsibility and more complicated things that I have to do that I don't have to do in the classroom that facilities maintains for me. So there's some fundamental differences there. I also can wear whatever I want. I can't do that in the classroom. Pluses and minuses. All right. So why Canvas? The selection of Canvas did not happen overnight. There was a 50 or so person committee that was meeting like weekly or every other week for 3 or 4 months, finally culminating in a 4-day event where 3 vendors were brought in to showcase their course management system. And then on the 4th day, the decision was to be made. I just got to be, I didn't get to choose, I just had to watch. And it was very dramatic. It was very dramatic because we came down to that last day, and all of us who were watching it didn't get to vote, knew what the group should do, but we just didn't know if they would do it.
So you were for Campus from the beginning? You were?
From everything I had heard about Canvas, it sounded great. I hate Blackboard with a passion, so let me just put that qualifier in there. And I have to be honest about that one. And so I was open, and of the course management systems that I know well, the one that I thought would be good didn't even make it to that level. So from watching the demonstrations, from watching what was said, from watching how they interacted with us, from watching how the students responded, it looked like it had to be Canvas. But you know, we're really asking everyone to step out of themselves and think about the state, not themselves. The representation of the different course management systems as it is across the state was mimicked in the room. Of those 50 people, 1 was from a college that uses Canvas, because that's about, 50, that's about right. So we did an initial poll right off the bat, and everyone was almost everybody was leaning towards Canvas. Talked everything through, pros, cons, good, bad, pulled everything out. At the end, it was as close to unanimous as it could be without being unanimous. You can figure that out, right? And why? The students thought it was great. There were site visits. What people who were using it said, they loved it. They just thought it was the greatest thing ever. There were all sorts of incredible statistics around usage of the platform by faculty in the classroom, not just online faculty who'd never thought about using a course management system to support their courses were doing it. It just was that ease. There are also amazing stories about 6-week adoptions, things that you don't want to do, but that people had done. The students were very supportive of it, and it was all good. It was all good, and it has continued to be all good because we are, this big giant user now. We're working very closely with Canvas. We're asking them to do things. There's things that they're working on perfecting that we need. We want to ensure that if you are a student taking courses at multiple colleges that have Canvas, that you can move seamlessly between those colleges so that you can log in once and access all your courses. That's working just fine for students, but we want to have the same thing for faculty. The tricky part is we have universal IDs for students. We don't have universal IDs for faculty, but we're trying to get that all straight so that there can be this very simple access. A nice part of Canvas too is their emphasis. They have an existing emphasis on community. You can go into the broader Canvas community and you can see questions that have been asked and answered. If you need to find instructions for how to do something, you can go in and find a video. They recently, without any notice, changed their user interface. And we're like, why did they do that? And I went on their website. There's a video. Here's why we did it. Explaining that it was more usable, and here's why they did it. They also don't wait to deploy changes. They just deploy them and push it out. It's entirely cloud-based. So if there's some new feature that they're getting perfected, it'll suddenly be perfected.
So you don't have to wait for 2.9
No.
and 2.
I've been in a workshop where somebody's teaching, and they clicked on something and go, oh, it didn't work like that yesterday. Like it just all of a sudden it was doing what you wanted it to do. So they're very responsive. In their community, they have the community vote on things that should happen. How important is it for Canvas to do blank, and the community votes on it. So it's at least looks very democratic.
Can I just throw in a little piece of trivia and history for you too, and your resentment for Blackboard? That actually, the Canvas was born at. I actually thought it was MIT. It's not. It was Brigham Young, which makes sense because Instructure, which is the company that runs Canvas, is in Salt Lake. It was actually 2 Brigham Young students who were given the challenge of modding a piece of software in their computer class, and the one that they chose was Blackboard because they hated it so much. So they reconstructed it and turned it into Canvas, and their professor wrote a check.
Well,
That's how it was born. So it actually is really it does have that democratic aspect to it and open source in the same sense that Moodle does because it was its origins.
and and they have a panda as their mascot.
Yeah.
And then at Christmas time, they pushed out this message that was like to the not a creature was stirring, not whatever. Night before Christmas.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it were some of the new things that they were rolling out. So like Christmas presents and they rolled out on top of all. It was quite funny.
So I'm confused about why we're talking about Canvas. Is there a possibility that we're going to go from the Moodle Canvas here, and if not, how would we even start that process?
So I'm I'm sharing that with you because it's a part of what OEI has been doing. And presently, if your college decided to go to Canvas, you could actually have Canvas for free until the end of our current contract. And then after that time period, we would be negotiating and hopefully continuing to support Canvas, probably not in its entirety, but continuing to make it so that it was really cost effective. And so, so whether or not you guys are going that way is something that for your broader campus community to discuss. So, yeah, this is just a piece. It's a piece of what we're doing.
We're going to Canvas tomorrow.
Great.
She's so good with asking just the right questions. Do all colleges have to move to Canvas? No. But we hope that the idea of being part of this broader community is something that's appealing. And we hope that colleges that don't choose to go now might look later and think that it makes sense. But no matter what, our goal, our mission, our purpose is to serve all 113 community colleges, no matter what platform they're doing. While we may be creating things that fit nicely in Canvas, we'll also find a way to make them available outside of Canvas. We're committed to doing that because the last thing we want to do is push anyone into a decision that they don't want to make.
Okay, so like we're Moodle Meisters here, but is there a possibility of any of our faculty trying Canvas for free?
That is such
to just explore it and
So we said they're very democratic. You can go on Instructure's website right now and you can get yourself a shell and go in and play in Canvas.
What website?
You just search Instructure or go to instructure.com.
I'll send it to
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was sent to you once before.
So, I mean, you know, I have no life, so it would be fun to play around with it.
Yeah. And one of the things that's, we're learning about the move between different course management systems and Canvas sort of as a system as it's happening. So we kind of know now, here's common things that happen and how you have to fix it in Blackboard and common things that happen with Moodle and Etudes and all that. So,
So Michelle, did you go from Blackboard to Canvas or Moodle to Canvas?
I haven't done anything yet. I'm just watching other people.
Oh.
That was my Christmas project that I then decided to actually have a Christmas break. Decided to do that. So just to share with you, this is the Canvas adoptions that have happened so far. IPA is not just a beer. It's an institutional participation agreement. I keep on forgetting that. And then I laugh whenever I see IPA here. It cracks me up. So we had, before we signed our contract, when we first went in to look at Canvas, we had two colleges that were full force in Canvas. That was Pasadena and Sierra. And then by the time we signed our contract, these other colleges had already gone to Canvas. But what we have here is 16 colleges that were not part of the OEI at all, not part of our pilot, that have made the decision to go to Canvas. 9 of our pilot colleges have made the decision to move, and it's actually more than that because this is the ones that have signed the IPA. Rio Hondo College is amongst that group, but they haven't signed the paperwork yet. Everyone's busy learning Canvas. So there's a little discrepancy there. So at this point in time, we have an IPA signed by the college in Canvas at about 31 colleges. IPA submitted to Canvas, that's another 10 or so. The form submitted by College 5, so as of around now, we have about 46 colleges, probably more, that have moved to Canvas. And that's in a pretty short time frame.
Do you have any examples that, of a course shell that,
I'll send it to you.
oh, okay, yeah.
She's got it all, and also if you go to that, you're familiar with that one site. If you go to that one site, you can go to the self-paced course. The self-paced Canvas course is in Canvas, and so you can actually see how they've set it up and how they've used Canvas there as well. All right, so as I said, you don't have to be in Canvas, you don't have to be anything. There are 3 levels of opportunity for participation in the OEI, and of course the big white out there is no participation, which you're welcome to do as well. So you could just use OEI resources, you could just use those readiness modules, you could just use other things as we roll them out. I didn't mention this on the accessibility front. We've been learning a lot because we're reviewing courses for course design and accessibility. We're learning about common accessibility issues. And @ONE's creating a library of resources for how do you fix these common issues. How do you make a PowerPoint accessible? How do you make a PDF accessible? all those good things. We also had a series of webinars last April on those common accessibility issues, and you can still find those on the @ONE site. And we're looking at doing more of that. One of the things we heard is there's a real need for resources around accessibility and scientific notation. So that's something that we want to address. And so more things coming out all the time. You could be a college using OER resources and in Canvas if you chose to go that route. Or you could choose to go all in, using resources, using Canvas, and being part of the exchange. So I put the exchange at the end because it's that part that we kind of wish just would go away. So the idea behind the exchange is to find a way to simplify student movement between colleges so that they can get the courses that they need at another college if they don't have it at their college, and there's an empty seat somewhere else. Our students have been finding courses up and down the state since the beginning of time. So that is not new. I had one summer where I was teaching a course at Foothill College, living down south, and I had a student at my Foothill who needed to have an exam proctored. They lived in Whittier. They lived down by me. So they've already been finding us all over. This is about simplifying it. Now, simplifying it is not easy. What challenges do you think there are in having students move between colleges? Who gets the money? And that's an easy one. You're teaching the course, you get the money.
No, I meant this,
Yeah.
the college.
Right, the college, yeah. The college.
Count the number, count the student.
Yes, who gets to
Yeah.
count? Right. You're going to lose that student. I'm going to lose my student because they're going to go finish that course they need over there with you, but they're going to come back and they're going to have their degree done with me, and I get to count them for having their degree done. So there's kind of an exchange there. But sort of more fundamentally. Registration. How do you get the student registered at that other college? What else? Come on, you guys were students at one point. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about the transfer and articulation.
Transfer and articulation. How do you get the completed course onto the transcript at the home school, or how do you get the transcript from the teaching college back to the home college? What else? What's one of those reasons why sometimes students register for courses that aren't quite the courses they need? Why do they need more units? Financial aid. We often have that, right? That student has to have those X number of units for financial aid or whatever. Maybe that's getting better, I'm not sure. Or insurance, it used to be insurance purposes. They could be on their parents' insurance, whatever. So there are mechanisms where you have an agreement amongst colleges where you kind of blend the financial aid so that that last course that the student needed over there can actually work towards the financial aid at the home college. So there's all kinds of really, really complicated things that have to be worked out. The exchange has been pushed off a couple of times because getting all the agreements in place to make those things happen is not easy. What I can tell you is that when the exchange rolls out, it's initially just going to be 8 colleges, those 8 full-launch colleges. And they're all going to have to sign an agreement for how they're working together to make this work. And the idea is the student would go into the registration system. They can't get the course they need at your course, then they're offered it through the exchange. They then have to at least update their original application that they used to apply to your college, and then that has to get sent back to the teaching college. So it's just simplifying all those different pieces and putting arrangements in place to make it a little bit easier. And it takes a lot of work to make things just a little bit easier. So that'll be rolling out eventually and slowly. And the only courses in the exchange will be courses that have been aligned to the rubric. And right now it's a select universe of courses that are required in associate degrees for transfer. So we're trying to focus on different courses. Now, down the road, this may be a way to help fill courses that you can never fill. Like maybe a second semester calculus course where you just don't have enough students, but if you were offering it online, you thought it was okay to offer it online, not making a statement about calculus online. It would be a way for those courses that you can't offer every term to be available to students every term. So right now we're focused on courses that, at least from the data, filled quickly, but we're looking at how do we expand that beyond to other courses that are out there. Questions about that? Yeah.
Are there any programs that can be used to change one platform to another?
To facilitate migration from one course management
Yes.
system to another? Absolutely. Yeah, there are tools for migrating courses from to Canvas, from Blackboard, from Moodle, from Etudes. Yeah, there are tools for that. They're not perfect. They're not perfect, and you know, whenever we're thinking about moving from one course management system to another, you want to be very careful. You don't want to take your old furniture, just pick it up and throw it into the new house without actually looking at where things match and where things fit. And so if you use an automatic tool to throw everything over, you're still going to have to go in and rearrange it and make sure everything works the way it should. But there are definitely systems in place to simplify it. Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know if you can answer this, but we were talking about agreements between colleges. I just have this like dream that we'll go into the high schools and capture all these high school students that want to take online courses before they come to our campus or before they transfer. Is there anything being done to like capture what, Kath?
Yeah, I'm teaching one at Nevada High School this semester.
Are really?
Yeah. So that's already being done.
Oh, I would love to know how that works. So we, oh, cool, I gotta talk to you.
All right, that's just sort of saying how all that's going to work. And you know, part of here too, you're going to go in and a course that's in the exchange will be a course that's in Canvas. It will have all those resources. So one of the things that we're really looking to see is if we have online courses with all the resources they possibly could have to facilitate student success, can we really help student success? So we're hoping to impact student success more generally across all of our colleges. And you know, we've had reports that even just people talking about the rubric and really thinking about course design, that leads back and go back and make changes, and voila, things are better. All right, final, oh gosh, I still have a bunch of things. I knew this was gonna happen.
Yeah.
All right, so, all right, accreditation. We all know accreditation is big, bad, scary. You now know, I mentioned earlier, regular effective contact. We've always had it. ACCJC, federal government, decided it makes sense too, but they call it regular and substantive interaction. It's just a snooty way of saying regular and effective contact. So, it's important to recognize that distance education has to meet certain parameters in order for it to be distance education. And you care about that because in order to receive federal funding, federal financial aid, your course has to meet the requirements for distance education. It can't be less than what is required of distance education. So the main key piece to what distance education is according to the ACCJC and also federal guidelines, is this element of regular and substantive interaction. This is in contrast to something called correspondence education. Correspondence education is where there isn't this regular interaction, and when interaction happens, it's generally the student coming and asking for help, or the student initiating it. And very clearly, correspondence education is not distance education. So we, again, here in California, we always have had that requirement of regular and effective contact that should have been preventing correspondence education. And now backing up that mechanism that we already had in place to help us do right by our students, we now also have that in the accreditation guidelines as well. We already talked a little bit about this, what you're doing around quality. Do you have anything in place to ensure regular and effective contact? Are you doing, I know each and every one of you is doing things to ensure regular and effective contact, but at the policy, process, procedure level, do you guys have anything that you're doing? When ACCJC comes in and asks her, how do you know that regular and effective contact is happening in your courses? Do you have an answer?
No.
No. So that's something to work on.
We have a checkbox on the curriculum form. And you're going to do that, and how are you going to do it? But it's actually being done.
Yeah, I've heard of colleges doing different things, like a self-assessment, where faculty go in and say, you know, am I doing regular effective contact, and actually indicate what they're doing and how they're doing it. But there really should be that check in place, because that is one of those big things. And the last thing you want is for the accreditors to come in and look at something that looks like correspondence education. Yeah.
I'm wondering if, so we get, there's a regular evaluation process. We do a self-evaluation, and then you also have a colleague or peer come in and look at your course. currently did my online course with a colleague, and they checked for that specifically and wrote about it, would that be considered?
That would definitely be
Check.
part of it.
Yeah, but that's not required, but you're
Yeah.
choosing to have that
Right,
course
so what I'm
looked at,
saying
so there's
is,
nothing.
we do have.
A mechanism.
Yeah, but not for every course, and that's your
More
choice.
people could be doing that, and that could be.
Well, that's part of what the rubric that I gave you, the cheat sheet one, that's for you guys to do your own self-evaluation. It's condensing the rubric, the 22-page rubric into 2 pages.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I guess I just had a couple of questions about regular and effective contact. So is there any definition of what regular is? How often is regular?
So that is one of those things. So locally, you guys are so good at this. You are supposed to have your own local definition that your academic senate has adopted for what is regular and effective contact. So you should have that as part of your documents here at the college. Very often people are borrowing existing ones because there are a lot of colleges that weren't thinking about it, and actually my boss at the OEI, I think her college's regular effective contact definition is the one I think that's most commonly adopted by colleges, because they got out there and put it out there, early on, and she also was someone who was out there talking about regular effective contact. So you need to have them, you should have them, there should be an understanding, there should be an expectation of what you're doing that is agreed upon by the faculty here at the college.
And then there's a follow-up question to that, which is on the documenting regular and effective contact. So if the instructor is doing everything in their power to try to encourage regular and effective contact, what percentage of compliance on the student's part is needed to satisfy the...
You have done your due diligence. You need to do your due diligence, and if you're really, it's something to look at if you're finding that it's just falling dead. But you need to do that. And we all know this. You have those students who are going to contact you 3 or 4 times within 30 seconds and not understand why you haven't responded. And then you have your other students who you're sending them messages over and over again, and they're not getting back to you, and they don't seem to care. And then you have your other students who you never reach out to them, and they never reach out to you because they don't need you. And so you have all those different things. You need to be doing your due diligence. And I think a great practice is setting up guidelines. That I'm going to reach out to students who haven't done this, or when they haven't logged in for this much time, and that way you're doing your part. You can't make them, which is it's always one of our big challenges and all that. One thing too, though, how are you contacting them? I was actually at something about a place where they had kind of intrusive advisors that assisted students to make sure they did what they had to do. And the ones that I called her, I emailed her, emailed, no response. Then I texted her. And they got the response. So one thing I think we need to think about is, are we using all the right mechanisms for reaching our students? And texting might be one to think about. So just something to think about. Not that, I don't think Moodle doesn't text, does it? So not that I'm giving a plug for Canvas, but Canvas is set up so that messages can be received by students by whatever modality they want to receive them. So if they want text messages, they can do that. And also, I'm sorry, I have to just share this because it's really cool. If a student sends you a message within the course, you can receive the message in your regular email, respond to them in your regular email, and it goes back to them in the course. Isn't that cool? I was like lurking in a course that was being taught, and I'm like, how did that happen? It's like magic. So that's neat. All right, yeah.
Okay, so you just said percentage of decline regular contact hours, and I can guarantee that by reading issue with that. So how do you?
It's a Title V regulation, right? So it's one of those things that you're supposed to be doing. And then
It's our issue here.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a like,
it's our issue here.
it's not an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
We do have James's definition, the one she was alluding to, that half the colleges in the state are using. We do have that in our Senate documents when we put through what we need for loss criteria. It's not good enough, but we do have something in there. And absolutely, well, there's a definition of regular effective contact that James created. It's not essential.
Yes.
Piloted it, and then
more. You need more of what you're doing around it to make sure.
And our problem isn't that we don't have an internet document, our problem
And
is
it's
that.
not in any Senate document that I know
Well,
about.
yeah, well, I can send you.
It's in the policies part section of
It
this.
is in there, but our problem is that we're not checking it, and that's where we run across the union, because
No, but what the policy says is you will have regular contact hours, it does not define what that means.
oh, we do have.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Maybe it
the-
says you have this, and this doesn't say answers. His question was, how many hours is that, or anything like that, it's not answered in that way.
We haven't listed all the different ways that you do it.
But not the amount, that's what.
That's,
Right.
Just a sidebar, Foothill College has this really great and thorough and comprehensive definition of regular and effective contact, I think, and it's pretty clear, right, it's right out there.
I think most everyone who has these sorts of policies and practices out there is really happy to share them. So if you're looking for something, you can find examples without any kind of problems. All right, so moving on. You guys, I'm so happy you asked all kinds of questions. So just briefly about the OEI course design rubric. So it has been sent to you by email, I heard. You also, if you want a copy of it, you can get your own copy here for your use. And then in our process for the course review, you're expected to be aligned to the rubric, but there are pieces in the rubric that can't necessarily be assessed just by looking at a static course. Because it's our practice not to review courses with students in it for FERPA issues and all of that. So we don't want to review your live course. We want to see your course as designed, not a course with you interacting with your students. So we need to know more about how you teach. So sort of integrated into this is also the @ONE teaching standards. And when people are getting a course reviewed, they actually have to fill out a document that talks about how they teach. So that pieces of the teaching standards and the rubric that aren't evident from the course, you've talked about how you teach and what you do. So it actually causes you to engage in a real self-reflection about what you teach and how you're doing things in your course. So the course design rubric has 4 pieces: course design, interaction and collaboration, assessment, and learner support. So it's course design, so why do we have a course design as a piece of it? Well, the course design looks at very specific elements: the structure of the course, the learning objectives, are you telling your students what you expect them to be able to do, the organization of the content, and instructional strategies. So I just wanted to walk through what it takes to be distinguished to exemplary. So first of all, the expectation is that you will make your course objectives available. And I always interpret this not necessarily to be your objectives as delineated in curriculum or your SLOs as delineated in curriculum. But it's, of course, you're going to have your SLOs, I think we all do now, on your syllabus, so they're there. But when you're teaching a particular unit or module in your course, do you tell your students what you expect them to know? And if you don't, shouldn't you? Wouldn't that make sense? If you're purposeful in your teaching, there's something you want them to know at the end. Why not tell them what you expect them to know at the end? And that's one of the pieces that lots of people are missing in their courses. They're there in the syllabus, maybe they're over here, but before the student engages in this content, this discussion, and this assessment, you haven't said, by the way, at the end of this, I expect you to know the difference between an experiment and a correlation. We haven't necessarily said that to them to help hone that student in on what they have to know. So content, you probably all have heard this and know this. Ideally, your content is made available in chunked or manageable bits so that a student can come in, they can take a bite and be done and come back later and take the next bite and move on. It should be clear how the instructional strategies will enable students to reach course objectives. So how you're teaching and how that actually relates to objectives is clear. And here's one that, I don't know, lots of people, not that many people do. Some people do. Provide your students with an opportunity to tell you what's working for them and what's not working for them, both during the course and then at the end of the course. One of the beautiful things about online courses is you can change things right smack in the middle. And do you remember that ad a while back about building planes while they're in the air?
Yep.
It was just one of those Super Bowl ads, and that was like the only time you ever saw it. It's the best. It's by the same people who did the herding cats video. You've seen that one, right? And then the running of the squirrels. Yeah, good sense of humor. So all of that makes sense, right? And if you're not doing all those things, it's something to think about. So interaction and collaboration, this just says a whole lot. So there's lots of forms of interaction, you know all of them, and collaboration is not just making your students do a group project, but making your students actually work together so that they are not, they can't just, not just this student doing this piece, this student doing this piece, this student doing this piece, and then they're coming together, but they're actually having to work as a unit to get to the end. Not an easy thing to do in an online course. And then a learning community is defined as the sense of belonging to a group rather than each student perceiving himself or herself studying independently. Do you do anything or communicate with your students in a way to remind them that they are part of a broader community, that they're not just individuals in a course? So it's something to think about, just little things about how you set things up, what you ask students to do, and so forth. So interaction, collaboration, 3 pieces: communication strategies, development of a learning community, and interaction logistics. So here are some that should be easy to find, and maybe some of this is all addressed already in that welcome letter, I'm not sure. Contact information for the instructor is easy to find. It includes multiple forms of communication. Everyone got that somewhere in your course? Here's how you find me. Here's how you don't find me. Let them know. Expected response time for replies is included, which actually kind of gets into that regular and effective contact. If you email me, I'll get back to you within 24 hours, Monday through Friday. If you leave me alone on the weekend, I'll get back to you on Monday, things like that. Students are nice if you really explain things to them. I'm a super conscientious instructor because the first time I took an online course, it was a course on how to use HTML. And I was banging my head over the weekend. I couldn't figure out how to make something work. And I had like 3 or 4 instructors and none of them got back to me. And so I never want to be that instructor. So I'm going to be gone, I warned my students. And I had one summer where I said, okay, this weekend is my anniversary. I'm going to try not to be in here, so please forgive me in advance if I don't get back to you. No one, all of you guys. So if you communicate with them, know what they can expect of you, they will be kind to you. So the instructor's role within the course is explained. What are you there for? Who are you? What are you going to do? Are you going to be there in discussion? Are you come into discussion later? Some people will just sort of watch discussion and then summarize it at the end. Some are actively in there, guiding things along, different approaches to that. Your students should know what to expect from you. Communication strategies promote critical thinking and higher order thinking aligned with learning objectives. Nothing makes me cringe more than when there's a discussion prompt that basically is post your essay. Right? How is that a discussion? So when you're thinking about discussion, there should be a starting point and then jumping off points from that starting point, not just everybody posting their own version of the same thing. That's a written assignment. So that's something that oftentimes people haven't thought this through beyond what they might do in the classroom. And I always like to think, if I was in the classroom and I wanted to have a robust discussion about something, but I was going to let my students have 15 minutes on the computer to prepare for the discussion, what would that look like? And that's sort of the starting point for a discussion online. Communication activities benefit from timely interactives and facilitate rapid response communication. So in other words, students are getting practice discussing things off the cuff, not just reporting back and looking up information. So development of learning communities. So this one, you guys already hit this right away. Instructors have a plan for initiating contact prior to the beginning of the class. So you have that welcome letter, so you've covered that already. But you also should be making communication at regular intervals throughout the class. Communication activities are designed to help build a sense of community among learners. So this may be getting them to interact with one another. Anyone have something on that side of things that they really like and want to share? Yeah.
We have a forum, when we're studying traditions, that unit, the forum is, create your own Brazilian carnival. What you think? would you design it, how would you design, what food would you use, music would you use, and everybody puts an initial post and then they discuss each other's. So everybody reads everybody else's carnival design or idea, and then they discuss it. So they kind of teach each other because they're students from, all ethnicities. So it's kind of fun to share that information.
So it seems like actually a way to start that discussion might even be before you get into the focus of what you're doing there, is to talk about traditions that they bring, that they have, that are unique to their,
Exactly,
to their
that's
people.
what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do the week before.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, student-to-student interactions are required as part of the course. I'm sure most people do that in their discussion. Students are encouraged to initiate communication with the instructor, so you actually, please, I'm here, talk to me. Collaboration activities, if included, reinforce course content and learning outcomes while building workplace useful skills such as teamwork, cooperation, negotiation, and consensus building. If you pay any attention to the news and what employers say they want from our students, those are the things that they want. They want them to read and write, but they also want them to be able to work together. All right, guidelines explain required levels of participation. Expectations regarding the quality of communications are clearly defined. Dedicate, guys, talk to students about that. Let them know that you are not their, you like them, but you're not their friend. They can't, they shouldn't be using text messaging with you, those sorts of things. Communicate that to them. And that, I always go back to the students and say, when you have a job, they're going to expect your emails to be well written and clear. And if they're not, that's going to be a big problem. So try to point out that link to the world of work. Ideally, a rubric or equivalent grading document is included to explain how participation will be evaluated. The instructor plans to participate actively in communication activities, and the instructor plans to use communication tools effectively to provide course updates, reminders, special announcements, etc. I think a lot of those are things that just about everyone does. They're pretty clear-cut things. Basic principles, though, that you can pull from this. You need clear and complete communication about expectations and how the course works. You need purposeful activities and interaction, and you need to promote connection, students to the course content, the students to other students, and also the students to you. I hate assessment. Assessment is boring. But your assessment, of course, should be tied to outcomes. It should maximize and effectively use the capabilities of your online platform. You should have multiple measures of assessment, not just one way of measuring what your student has learned. And ideally, you use samples and rubrics. You let your students know what good is and what's not good and so forth. All right, learner support. So the learner support section, it's about accessibility, but it's also about making sure you are making things as easy as possible for your students. How many of you require your students to download some form of software during the course of your class? Okay. Do you provide them with a link to make that download? Okay. How many of you are using PDFs in your course? You are requiring your students to download software. And you should make sure that you have a PDF reader there available to them. I have a feeling that will work. That's a really common one. I heard a great example. So, all right, so you have them reading PDFs every week. Well, they should have the reader after the third week, right? What happens when they're on somebody else's computer who doesn't have the reader? Is it that hard for you to put the reader there, make sure it's readily available? Or at least maybe you have it, right there with the reading for the first few weeks, and then you have it very clearly available in a resource section so that when they come upon that instance where they need it, they can find it. I know it's easy to forget that those things that you always have are there. You should also be providing students with information about your institutional policies as well as the support available to them. And then, of course, information on accommodations. This part gets really detailed and into all sorts of stuff that I would not even begin to bother you about. But one of the things that we've seen is that there are a lot of accessibility issues happening in courses that shouldn't happen. You all know that your videos all have to be captioned. You all know that your images need to have alt tags. You know those things. So just make sure that you are and make sure that you are making them accessible and taking advantage of the resources that you have to make that happen. And that, very unflashy end. That is my final slide. Here's my email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Please feel free to contact me. If you have lost your link to the rubric and don't want to carry this home, that's where you find it. And you can also go on our website, which is ccconlineed.org. You can find access to all the different resources that we have and see updates on the things that we're doing. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we have evaluation for sure. Twice a week. You all need them, right? Yeah. Any other questions while she's wrapping up?
Jessica Park, anthropology.
Students, disability services, please, if you have videos, you need captions, if you have questions about your textbooks, are they accessible? Contact me or Stacy.
Paula Allen, math.
Andrea Wang.
James Gonzalez, Community Services.
Gina Cullen, Johnson. Sandy Wilson, Marketing Arts.
Eric Bruce, History.
Kim Lauren, kinesiology.
Stephen Gibson, geology.
So this is so exciting. Some of you I've never met before, but I've been sending you emails. So welcome to our first meeting.
Thanks for doing it.
Do we want to, is there anything else? Any questions? We have a lot to do. We're going to be working on a handbook, DE handbook. We have DE plan to write. So I encourage anybody who wants to help to come forward. As I said in the email, you don't actually have to come to the meeting. You can do it, in the cloud. So you'll be hearing more from me. Please read my email. So almost everything she talked about, I sent to you all the way. Not you. Oh, yeah. Please send it to DE faculty. So right. So that's it. I wasn't around on anybody else who would like to be on my email list, even though you're not, I am really only sending out to D faculty, so I'm always going to be on my. I gotta turn this off.